Hi, this is David Reese from ESU 13, and this is Pep Talks. Pep Talks is a monthly video series that brings you strategies, encouragement, and sometimes challenges to help remind you that the little things that paras do can make a big impact on students and schools. So I got a story for you. Yesterday, I pick up my 8th grade son from football practice. And he gets in the vehicle and I ask him how his practice, and he gives the typical 8th grade answer, okay. It was okay. Now my son loves football, and if he's going to talk about anything, he's going to be talking about football. And so I was like, oh, this is going to be a boring ride home. He's not really in the talkative mood. But I decided, because I want to be a good dad, to throw out some more questions, and I threw out a question I didn't think was going to land very well. I asked him, so how was school today? And of course, his answer was, it was okay. And then he said it was a pretty typical day. And then I sat there, and then he brought up, but tomorrow I'm really excited. And I'm like, oh, what's going on tomorrow? And the reason he's excited about tomorrow, I guess that's now, today, is his child care and development class that he's in. They get to take a trip to the preschool. And so he's excited because that's usually, they work with preschool kids for one period, but because they're taking a trip to the preschool, it's going to be first and second period. So he's excited about that. Maybe he's excited about missing second period. But no, he was pretty excited about going to the preschool and working with the preschoolers. And he was telling me about what they're going to do. And of course, I made the joke, you better brush up on your ABCs. So this conversation with my son got me thinking about today's Pep Talk. Today's Pep Talk is the ABCs of behavior. Now, when we talk about ABC, we usually think of simple and elementary and no problem, right? The Jackson 5 song, ABC, easy as 1, 2, 3, simple as do, re, mi. I would like to play that song, by the way, but I'm sure since this is on YouTube, it would be flagged for some copyright issue. But yeah, when we're talking about behaviors, our student behavior is easy, right? And the obvious answer is oftentimes they aren't easy. Solving student behaviors was easy. At ESU 13, we would bottle that up and sell it. Wait, no, we're ESU 13. We would bottle it up and we would provide it to the Panhandle as a free service. Yeah, student behaviors aren't easy, but the ABCs of behavior is an effective strategy that you might use in certain situations, and it can be an effective way to improve student behaviors. So let's learn more about it. Let's go to the classroom. Okay, so let's talk about the ABCs of behavior. This is one of the simplest tools to help us understand why students do what they do and understand how we can respond in a way that supports them. ABC stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequence. So A is for antecedent. The antecedent is the trigger. That's what happens right before the behavior. So if the antecedent doesn't happen, the behavior often doesn't happen either. Antecedents can come in 3 forms. Usually they are events, people, or objects. So an event could be maybe the student gets dropped off by the bus late. Maybe it's a person. Sometimes it's all about who gives the directions to the student that triggers them. Or it could just be an object. Shoot, it could be an alarm clock that goes off in the morning and boom, the student is triggered for the day. In the classroom, antecedents could be things like the teacher handing out a challenging assignment, a peer making a joke at the wrong time, or maybe just a signal that it's time to transition to the next activity and the student's not ready to do that. B is for behavior. The behavior is the student's observable action. This is what we can see and describe without judgment. So for example, if the student's shouting out, if the student's refusing to do work, if the student is pushing in their chair and leaving the table, We're not labeling it as being disrespectful. Okay, that's judging their action. We're just describing what happened. And C is for consequence. The consequence is whatever happens right after the behavior. This can reinforce or discourage the behavior. And it's not always negative. It can be positive too. If a student yells and the teacher gives attention, that attention might actually reinforce the yelling. It's a consequence. If a student avoids work by putting their head down and the work is just taken away, avoiding becomes the reward. On the flip side, if a student raises their hand and gets praise or recognition, that praise becomes the reinforcing consequence. So when you think of A, B, C, picture like a story. The A, the antecedent, what set it up. B, the behavior, what happened. And C, the consequence, what followed. Here are some practical tips for parents. First, observe and describe without judging. Write down what you see or describe what you see, but not what you think the student's intent was. Second, look for patterns. Does the behavior always happen before math? Always after lunch or always during transitions? That'll give you a clue. Third, adjust the antecedent. If you know transitions spark issues, maybe you prepare the student with a quick reminder before the change is happening. Or maybe you figure out ways that you can cut out a couple transitions to avoid the behavior happening. Next, shape the consequence. If negative attention is reinforcing the behavior, look for ways to give attention when the student is showing positive behavior instead. So you know student wants behaviors recognized with attention, so recognize the positive ones. Finally, use ABC as a communication tool. So instead of saying to a teacher, maybe to a principal, the student is acting out, you can see, here's what was happening before, here's the behavior I saw, and here's what happened afterward. That's clear, concrete information that a teacher or administrator could use. So that's the ABCs of behaviors explained. Antecedent, behavior, and consequence. Now, are the ABCs always the right approach when dealing with behavior? No, not always. They are especially helpful when you're trying to figure out what's triggering the behavior. It's also helpful if you're thinking there might be a pattern. It's also very helpful, again, like I said in the classroom, when you want to communicate to someone else what's going on. ABCs aren't necessarily super helpful if it's a one-time or a rare behavior that a student is having. It's also not super effective if the student's like just in crisis mode and they're crashing out, as the kids say nowadays. But it has its place, and I encourage you to use it. Challenge yourself sometime this week in your setting. See if you can observe a behavior and think about what happened before the behavior and what happened after the behavior, so you can understand what is going on with the behavior, and then think about how you can communicate that with maybe a teacher or maybe with the principal or maybe even with the student. I do have a homework assignment for you. In the video description, you will find a link to an article. That article is from a website called The Model Teacher, and it just gives some more ideas about the ABCs of behavior. I think it's actually titled The ABCs of Behavior. Very genius title that they came up with. Well, this has been Pep Talk. I'm Dave Grease from ESU 13. Thanks for joining, and we will see you next month on the next video. Have a great week.